Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing is an authorized brother dealer and repairs all brands of machines. Mid-South Sewing, known for their many fabrics, classes, and individual instructions. Classes on sewing and embroidery machines, software, sergers, and quilting. Mid-South Sewing, Knoxville and Murfreesboro.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. nexttonewknox.com. And by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations, knoxvilleflowerpot.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on this edition of Tennessee Life, we head to a Morristown factory where workers take pride in making boots by the thousands for our nation's servicemen and women.
I mean, footwear is such an important part of their kit, right? Their uniform. If footwear doesn't perform, then they can't do their jobs, and that can put them in, life-threatening situations.
These goats in Tazewell may have some quirky animal behaviors, but in return, they provide super soft cashmere.
It takes about 4 goats a whole year to grow enough cashmere to make one adult-sized sweater. So it's a long process.
And meet an athlete who started setting world records in his 70s.
You need to get out of that rocker, get off the couch, turn off the TV, and get something that challenges your body. You can do it as a senior.
Those stories next on Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. If you know anyone in the armed forces, chances are the boots on their feet were made in Tennessee. A company in Morristown takes special pride in making gear for our American soldiers. We talked with the original Footwear founder about the detail put into each pair of boots.
The pride and the honor that comes from being able to make boots for people who honestly every day of their lives put their lives on the line for the rest of us, it's what drives us. My name is Kevin Cole. I am the CEO of the Original Footwear Company, and we are in Morristown, Tennessee. Original Footwear has been in Morristown just 2.5 years now. Prior to us being here, there was a pre-existing footwear company in this building. We came in and took over a bunch of the assets, moved in new manufacturing in terms of different parts of the process, and have since been manufacturing boots for the U.S. military in this location. We have 2 brands. We have Original SWAT and Altama. Original SWAT is focused on the police, law enforcement segment. Altama is focused on the military segment. It is in this building that we make all of the Altama boots for the U.S. military. So all the government, U.S. Army, hot weather, temper weather, Air Force temper weather, all those boots are made here in this location. For example, our U.S. Army contracts, we make what's referred to as the bag boots. So as a new recruit, you go in, you're issued your equipment. In terms of footwear, everyone into the Army gets a pair of hot weather boots, and they get a pair of temperate weather boots, which basically is waterproof. And we're making both of those products here. There are other manufacturers, but there's a high probability that if you have someone that's just joined the Army, they're getting their boots that were made right here in this plant in Morristown. And footwear is such an important part of their kit, right? Their uniform. If it doesn't perform, then they can't do their jobs, and that can put them in, life-threatening situations. So, for me personally, and we stress it to everyone that every single employee we have here, what an honor it is, and quite frankly, how important it is that product be perfect and that their lives do depend on it. I was never in the military, wasn't a policeman. My background, I was actually a Nordic skier, and I skied at the University of Vermont, And the company that I skied for owned Merrill Footwear. And I got a job working for Merrill in R&D. And they're a hiking boot company, and really enjoyed that. And then went on to work in R&D at Timberland and then at Nike. Spent a couple years living in Taiwan. Then came back, worked for a company called High Tech, and then started my own business. And from there, just have had a passion for footwear, a passion for making better footwear, and have just continued to explore that. This facility here, we're producing somewhere between 25 and 30,000 pair of boots a month that are going mostly to the U.S. military, but again, as I mentioned, quite a few places around the world as well. There's really 4 main processes. The cutting process, where we're going to cut all the materials, the foams, the fabrics, the linings, the leather, and we're going to get it all prepped and get it all staged. Then it's going to go into the second area, which is sewing. And then it's just a process of taking one piece, adding it to the next piece, and stitching it together. The third is called lasting, and that's where we actually make it look like a boot. We're going to pull that upper around a last and then cement it in place so it sort of starts to look like a boot. And then the fourth area is bottoming or finishing. That's where we're going to inject the midsole, attach it to the outsole, and then we're going to clean and finish it and put it in a box. From my perspective, you get a spec from the U.S. military that says this is how you're going to build the boot. So whether it's any of our competitors or us, you're given a framework. But there's a lot of different things that you can do to make that boot fit better, to make it more comfortable. You know, one of them is back part molding. To me, it's one of the most important steps of the process. A lot of our competitors don't do it, but we will absolutely, every single pair of boots we make, and it actually molds that counter, so there's really no break-in period. People buy new boots and like, oh, I gotta break them in. Well, you break them in because that counter is not molded, right? We'll pre-mold that counter in the boot so that all of a sudden you don't have that. You take it out of the box, you put it on, no blisters, you're ready to go. The other thing with the military boots is that, you know, there's a wide range of hardness in the polyurethane midsole. And we run at the softer end, which is actually harder to control in manufacturing, but it makes it significantly more comfortable for the guys wearing the boots. All the materials we use for the U.S. military are, like our boots here, 100% made in the USA. Right? So everything for a military contract is referred to as Berry compliant. We're using leather from cows. We use materials like Gore-Tex to keep the feet dry. From a sales standpoint, we're selling in 67 countries around the world. We have some of the leading contracts for foreign military, you know, Singapore Army, Singapore Police, Kenya, Afghanistan, Malaysia, a lot through the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, UAE. We have a lot of machines that allow us to automate as much as we can, but it is still a very manual process. It requires a lot of people to do a lot of the different operations. We have right around 250 people employed here in Morristown. East Tennessee, and specifically this region, has a history of manufacturing. It's in people's DNA, and having that is a necessity, right? I mean, you could not have this operation in California, right? You just don't have again, that manufacturing DNA that exists here in Morristown. Our future, honestly, is we have not been able to touch, because of our capacity constrictions, any of the US-made commercial business that's out there. After you've gone through basic training, now you've taken your product that you were issued, now you're gonna go buy a pair of boots, or maybe you need a second pair of boots. You're gonna go to the base exchange, you're gonna buy that. That business, we haven't had the opportunity to actually make enough boots to actually go after that business yet. So for us, that's the next thing. I've had a great opportunity in my career to meet, all of these people who that's their life. Their life is protecting and serving the general public and the population of the United States. To be able to put them in footwear that's going to perform, that's really going to, our goal is to get them home safely at the end of the day, but also comfortable, right? Where if they get home and their legs don't hurt and their feet don't hurt and their back doesn't hurt because their boots were uncomfortable, then that's a win for us, right? That's the success that we're driving for every single day.
Later, we meet a world-class senior athlete who got his start by chance, lifting weights in Pigeon Forge. But next, we go to a Tennessee goat farm where cashmere is king.
If you've ever worn a cashmere sweater, then you know just how soft the material can feel. But did you know cashmere comes from goats? A love for knitting turned Beth Bonert into a cashmere goat farmer. She showed us how she harvests those precious fibers at Mountain Hollow Farm in Tazewell.
I knew that I wanted to have a farm. I never had a farm. I always wanted to have a farm, and I thought this was the perfect opportunity. So I started researching what kind of animals I wanted to raise. I knew I didn't want to raise anything big because I'm home alone a lot, and that scared me a little bit. So I was focusing on goats and sheep. And when I learned that cashmere comes from goats, I knew that's what I wanted to do. My grandma taught me to knit when I was, 8 or 10 years old. She taught me to knit and crochet. Of course, I didn't stick with it as a child, but I picked it up again as an adult before we moved here. So being a knitter and a crocheter, I knew when I saw that cashmere comes from goats, that's what I wanted to do. I'm Beth Bonert, and I own Mountain Hollow Farm here in Tazewell, Tennessee. We're a cashmere goat farm. I grew up in South Central Pennsylvania and lived there my whole life till we decided to move here in 2007. It's kind of cool where we live. It's like 10 minutes from Kentucky and 10 minutes from Virginia. Natural fibers, and cashmere especially, are just so wonderful. I'd like to knit mostly with cashmere, of course, but also merino wool, which is very soft. The feel of the yarn in your hands is so much different from like the cheap acrylic yarns you can buy at the big box stores. It's just wonderful. It just feels so good. And I say, if you're going to spend that much time handling a yarn, it ought to be something that feels good in your hands. We have 15 goats right now on the farm. Goats have wonderful personalities, just like humans. We've got shy ones and we've got outgoing ones. We have little devils and we have little saints in our goat herd. In addition to that, we have 6 Shetland sheep, llama, and 4 Angora rabbits. And we harvest the fiber from all of those animals to turn it into yarn. We send the fleeces off to a mill and have it spun into yarn, and then they send the yarn back to us and we sell it in our store. All goats, except for Angora goats, have 2 hair follicles. So they have a down and a guard hair, like a lot of dogs are double coated. That's how all goats are, except for Angora goats. The cashmere is the down. So while all goats have down, not all down is considered to be cashmere. It has to be under 18.5 microns in diameter. So a micron is 1/1000th of a millimeter. So the down has to be very, very fine. It has to be at least 1.25 inches long, and it needs to have some crimp, which is like a curliness in the fiber, in order to be considered cashmere. Goats grow cashmere seasonally. So they start growing it in June, usually, and they grow it through December. And then they hold on to it, usually till February or March. It depends on the goat as to when they start to shed, but they start to shed it naturally, usually in February or March. In March here on our farm, we have goat combing days. We harvest all of our cashmere in March, sometimes a little bit going into April, because some of them, just like a dog, some of them shed out all at once and some shed out over time. So those that shed out over time especially, we have to comb them out once, and then a couple weeks later we'll try and comb them again. And I say combing, the way we harvest the cashmere from the goats is to brush out the cashmere with a dog brush. It is called goat combing. I suspect because the original or the official tool to use is a comb-like tool. What we use is the slicker style and the rake style dog brushes. That being said, it's easy. Anybody can do it, but there's also a technique that I'm not sure I can fully explain it without demonstrating it. And what I've noticed is, we have a lot of people come here during the goat combing days to comb a goat, and they are not as efficient at it as those of us who have done it. So yeah, there is definitely a technique that you build up over time, but I think it just takes practice and some mentoring. I had no mentoring when I started this, so I had to kind of figure it out on my own. When we tell people about goat combing days, I think at first they're amused. The thought of combing a goat, why would you do that? And when they come out to do it, they're always kind of in awe, because when you comb that cashmere out, the goats feel soft when you pet them, but that guard hair is really not that soft. I mean, we think it is because we're not comparing it to anything, but when you get a big old fluff of that cashmere out and you hold that in your hand, you just realize then, at that point, how much of a difference it is between the guard hair, which you're petting, and the cashmere that you're feeling. So people are kind of in awe, and they have fun with it. And some of the goats have personality, and they do some shenanigans that make people laugh, and it's a lot of fun. Cashmere really is a luxury fiber, and it's a luxury fiber and it's expensive for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is a very fine fiber. It's very, very soft. If you would look at the fibers, each individual hair underneath a microscope, you would see it's very, very thin. And that's what makes the yarn so soft. The other thing that makes it expensive, besides the fact that it's so desirable, and of course there's the whole supply and demand aspect of it, where cashmere is a relatively low supply, because a cashmere goat only produces on average 3 to 5 ounces of cashmere per year. So it takes about 4 goats a whole year to grow enough cashmere to make one adult-sized sweater. So it's a long process. We will probably have one kitchen-sized garbage bag full of cashmere to send to the mill. So compare that to sheep's wool, where on a decent-sized sheep you'll get a whole garbage bag off of one sheep. It takes us 12 goats to fill a garbage bag. It gives you a little bit of an idea of the supply and demand phenomenon that happens with cashmere. It's like Christmas Day when we get that box of yarn back from the mill, and we cut it open and we just pet on it and we feel it. It's a knitter, crocheter kind of thing. You love the yarn. We sell our cashmere by the ounce. We have it made up into 1 ounce skeins. It's 50% cashmere, 50% silk. To give you an idea of the size of that skein, 1 ounce doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not, but it'll make a medium-sized scarf. And oh my gosh, I have learned so many things in farming that I never ever thought I would do or could do even. I used to get faint just going into hospitals, and now I give shots, I do minor surgeries. I've learned to skin a goat to save its pelt after it died. I never thought I would be able to do things like that. And farming toughens you up, and I say that in a good way.
Some things just get better with age. That's the case with Ray Fournier of Pigeon Forge. He stumbled into powerlifting on a whim. Then he started winning competitions and setting world records in his 70s. Producer Stephanie Aldridge has his story.
How in the world did you get interested in powerlifting in the first place?
Quite by accident. When I retired and moved to Pigeon Forge, I wanted to continue my activity. I did not want to be in my retirement. I did not want to be subject to medicine all of the ailments that you have relative to the so-called old age. One of the things that I did was I made a commitment to keep myself healthy. So when I came here, I was working out in my basement, and then someone said, "Oh, you ought to try the community center." And I went over to the community center and I checked it out. It was a great place, so I decided to join. And after I had been there a couple of years, there was a man that came into the Pigeon Forge Community Center. I happened to be lifting, and he came over. He saw me, saw what I was doing, and he said, "Hey, you know, you ought to think about lifting competitively." I had a view of lifting as steroids, performance enhancing drugs of all kinds, that sort of thing. And I said, no, I wouldn't be interested. But he did. He made a convincing argument. He said, you ought to try it. He said, it's not what you think it is. I said, I'll give it a year's shot and we'll see what happens. I joined this organization. It was what they call the USAPL, the United States Powerlifting Association. I went to their state meet and I won that event, and I thought, well, that's pretty good. But at the time, I knew that I could be competitive because I had looked at the figures, I had looked at the numbers, and the numbers, I said, I can do that. I can do what they're doing. So by winning the state meet, I would qualify for the national meet, which was in Orlando, Florida. So I attended that and won that one. So winning the national meet then qualified me for the World Championships with the International Powerlifting Federation. And that happened to be in South Africa.
How old are you, Ray?
I'm 73.
Well, I don't think you feel like it, and you certainly don't look like it, whatever that's supposed to look like, right?
I feel really good. I mean, I feel great. And I would recommend for anyone that's 50 or over to be involved in something that is challenging to your body. I'm a lifetime drug-free lifter. I have never taken drugs, never wanted to, never will. I even resist taking an aspirin.
Well, let's brag just a little bit. What kind of weight are we talking about here so people at home can understand just how accomplished this is?
There are 3 lifts in powerlifting: the squat, bench, and deadlift. On the squat, I do anywhere from 308 to 318. On the bench, anywhere from 200 to 210 on the bench, and on the deadlift, anywhere from 400 to 418. Those are usually where I lift. Each of those has a world record attached to it, and then there's also a world record for the total. And total those 3 together, and you can also get a world record there. I was fortunate enough to set each of those world records at the meet in Laughlin, Nevada. Have
you always been very athletic, very active, even when you were younger?
When I was younger, I was involved in high school sports. I was involved in college sports, and as a young man, late teens, 20s, I wanted to be in the Olympics, but never happened.
What did you want to do?
I wanted to weightlift. So I wanted to do the weightlifting in the Olympics, and I felt pretty good about that at the time. But life goes on, and now I'm doing it here at 70, in my 70s. So
could you have even imagined?
No, absolutely not. I never thought I'd be doing this at this age.
And tell me more specifically about where you grew up.
As you can see from the emblem on my shirt, I'm a member of the Oneida Indian Nation, which is it's Aboriginal lands. We're east of Syracuse, west of Utica. The Oneida Nation does support me in my activities with primarily on the national and international level with powerlifting.
What does it do for you? I mean, obviously there's, it's nice to win something, but it has to be more than a trophy or a medal that keeps you going with something like that, I would think.
Really, my goal was to stay healthy in my retirement. What powerlifting does is keeps it focused. It's it's competitive, but it's not a real macho kind of thing. It's the people that you meet, they're all working together, they're helpful, in fact, you become friends with these people. So.
All right, Ray Fournier, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and I'm so glad that you got inspired in Pigeon Forge to start powerlifting.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Ray makes us all want to get out and challenge ourselves and never let age stand in our way. We hope you've enjoyed the stories we brought you. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you on the next Tennessee Life.
Tennessee Life is sponsored by
Mid-South Sewing is an authorized brother dealer and repairs all brands of machines. Mid-South Sewing, known for their many fabrics, classes, and individual instructions. Classes on sewing and embroidery machines, software, sergers, and quilting. Mid-South Sewing, Knoxville and Murfreesboro.
Tennessee Life is also brought to you by Next to New, an upscale consignment shop serving Knoxville. nexttonewknox.com, and by The Flower Pot, for over 100 years, offering flowers and same-day delivery with 2 convenient Knoxville locations, knoxvilleflowerpot.com, and by viewers like you. Thank you.